1987, one of my favourite games of all time was released in the arcades. R-Type was, in my opinion, the best sideways scrolling shooter of its generation and proved massively popular in the arcades and on the home micros. So imagine how excited I was when I stumbled upon its sequel in the arcades in 1989. As soon as I seen it, I couldn't wait to have a go on it. And at first glance, it's pretty much as you were, but then appearances can be deceptive, and there were subtle changes made to the game that, in all honesty, split opinion. The visuals had been given a revamp, and while it's hard to spot at first, you can soon see for yourself that there is a lot more going on in this game in terms of backgrounds, but also in terms of the enemies as well. Just about every sprite is that little bit larger over the original, and that little bit more defined as well, with a subtle enhancement on each explosion, and these neat smoke trails from certain enemy projectiles, to the few extra frames of animation on just about everything. But it still is unmistakably an R-Type game in terms of visuals. The attention to detail is impressive throughout, with a favourite of mine being these kind of flying tanks, with the side panels moving on them as they shoot. Irem really did spend a long time in the visuals, and it shows. In all honesty, these are some of the nicest looking sprites I have seen in a game of this type. The level bosses were huge in the original, and guess what? They're big in this version too, with some taking up about a third of the screen, and the usual enemy battleship consuming an entire level. But everything has this more gritty and grainy look to it, and I personally think this game looks great. The backgrounds are outstanding, with the pipework collage in the background of the first level looking busy, and these waterfall effects in level 2 just looking absolutely gorgeous. And the industrial zone at the start of this level here, showing a more earthbound setting after a kind of nuclear holocaust, with destroyed buildings and mangled pylon towers. It looks amazing, it really does. In fact, everything looks so good, you don't realise how good the parallax scrolling is as well. It's easy to get lost in these visuals. The soundtrack has been improved massively as well. The previous game had a really good soundtrack, but this soundtrack is on a whole other level. The opening level tune is excellent, and I have to admit, there are few things in games I prefer more than a pumping first level soundtrack, and this is right up there, and it helps draw the player into the action. And of course, the boss tune is outstanding. Just like in the previous game, but this one sounds even better in my opinion. It's got a different feel to it. It sounds more sinister and darker this time, but boy do I love that tune. Speaking of the bosses, the challenge in these has been ramped up in nearly all of them, and also the phallic nature. Let's move on, shall we? The gameplay has seen some enhancements as well. The charged weapon has 2 levels now, the first one being this bigger straightforward outblast, and the other being this kind of wave attack that covers more of the screen but takes far longer to charge. And boy does it come in handy, as this game does get busy. Now the first game was by no means an easy game, but it was certainly challenging. Well, this time around, somebody at Irem must have asked, what about the difficulty? And the answer was simply, yes. This game has seen the difficulty dial move all the way from easy to freaking insane. I am not joking. This is one brutal game to beat. I had completely forgotten how tough this game was, and I've changed the difficulty to easy in the system menu, and it's still freaking impossible. It was not a game I completed on the arcades, but I do remember getting quite far with my 30p, but now I am getting destroyed at every turn. But then, why would Irem make the game easy? Arcade machines are designed to eat your money. They reach all the way into the back of your wallet and say, thanks very much, you're going to need some more of that. The challenge was a little off-putting. Only a year later, I read in a magazine that a home port of this would be coming over to Nintendo's new 16-bit machine, and it would be called Super R-Type. But being a Sega fanboy at the time, I thought this was a game I would never get to play at home. The very first time I seen Super R-Type on the SNES, I was left underwhelmed. The slowdown was hard to ignore, and this put me off initially. I could have got it as my pack-in game when I got my Super Famicom in 1991, but I opted for Super Mario World instead. But the force is strong with this game, and it didn't take long before I caved in and got myself a copy of it, and for a discount price of £30, as it was proving tough to shift. When I got the game to play at home, I tried to ignore the slowdown and play around it, but you can't, in all honesty. The slowdown is so bad, the game practically comes to a standstill. And if you adopt the tactic of clearing as much as you can to avoid the slowdown, then prepare to fail, as it will still rear its ugly head. It's a real shame about the slowdown as well, as this is actually a decent game without it. Let's start by stating it's not really R-Type II. It's more like R-Type II Remix or something. The first level in the SNES is this open space level, and the second level is closer to the first one of the arcade. I am not sure why this was, but to be honest, it makes little difference, as it's still an R-Type game at its very core. Once you get to the second level, you can see some of the compromises that had to be made from the arcade version. The level of detail on the enemy sprites is reduced. The explosions are less detailed. The smoke trails from the missiles are missing, and everything is just that little bit smaller. But where this game does excel and match the arcade closely is with the soundtrack and the sound effects. Again, the SNES had no issues producing great quality sound, and Super R-Type is another example of this. The soundtrack is epic, it really is, and all the laser and explosion effects are all spot on to the arcade really. And the other area where this game is closely aligned to the arcade is with the difficulty. This game is tough, but not all for the right reasons. The biggest hurdle with this game is the slowdown, and the SNES was well renowned for having games that slowed down a lot. But in most games, it's annoying to the point of distracting. But in this game, it's beyond playable really. Some people may argue the slowdown helps with the difficulty level and makes the game easier. I say that's nonsense, as everything slows down, even the responses to your inputs. Outside of the slowdown, this game is crazy tough, and I do mean crazy tough. Again, even on easy, it was brutal at times. There are just so many enemy projectiles flying all over the place, and it's just relentless. But then, who wants an easy game? Not me, that's for sure. But somewhere between tough and insane would be nice. This is a game I never ever beat on the arcades or at home, but I knew the history of R-Type and knew you would need 2 playthroughs to beat the game, and I still find that a very cheap move to extend the life of a game. But for the home port, it was this slowdown that really prevented me from giving it a go. Super R-Type was a game that may have been a bit too ambitious for the SNES, but I have read of a homebrew version that is available that eliminates all of the slowdown, and I would love to get my hands on that to give it a go. In closing, R-Type II was another great shooter from Irem, and is definitely worth a go. Super R-Type on the SNES was a great shooter, completely ruined by slowdown. Anyway, that was my look back at R-Type II and its SNES variant. If you like this video, then please do give me a sub and a thumbs up, or maybe even a comment or two below about your memories of R-Type II or Super R-Type. And that's all from me, folks. Thanks for watching.